Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach.
And today we're going to be talking about the classic, the quintessential 1978 scary movie, Halloween.
On Halloween. Well, a day before Halloween. So, before we actually get down to the movie, we're going to play a little bit of a game, a little special Halloween game. And this is different than our normal trivia. We're going to be listing off some horror movie quotes here. So if you hate horror movie quotes, you can skip ahead of this. So the rules are, I'm going to read off a quote. I don't know the answers to this. There's an answer sheet that I've not looked at yet. Then, Matt, I'm going to have you guess. Well, actually, here, you know what? I'll guess first because you're going to know most of these. I'm going to guess what movie it's from. Bonus points if you can tell me what character said the line.
Okay.
And then you're going to guess.
Okay.
/ no. All right. So, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering. So, I have no idea what this one is. So, I'm going to guess that it's Carrie?
It's not Carrie.
I kind of thought so.
Zach, I've been trying to get you to watch this movie. It's Hellraiser. It's Pinhead.
See, if we had watched that last week, I would have known.
Yeah, we were going to watch Hellraiser before we switched to Chopping Mall.
Yep, if we had watched that last week, I would have known. And then I wouldn't have asked you. And it was Pinhead, so bonus points for the points that we're not keeping track of. All right, and this one, I think we both know. Everyone's entitled to one good scare. This, of course, was in Halloween. And it was the cop guy, right?
I believe it was the sheriff.
Sheriff Lee Brackett.
All right, 1-1.
All right. Well, I mean, you knew that one. We're not keeping score here. And you know why. The next one. I'm going to eat your brains and gain your knowledge. Now, this one I feel like I should know. It's got to be a zombie movie. I honestly don't have anything. I can't think of this at all.
The zombie movies that I know where there's like a thing that happens is the Return of the Living Dead, where there's the weird like cemetery thing, and they can kind of talk. But I think this is Planet Terror. I think this is a Grindhouse film.
Oh, you're right. Planet Terror. I've never even heard of that. Dang. Okay. And this one, I cannot believe this is... I know what this one's from. I want to see if you know. Don't think horror so much. I don't know why this is on here, but it says, never jump into a pile of leaves with a wet sucker.
I have no clue.
It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown.
What? And that's in the horror
I know,
quotes?
why is it in there?
That's the horror quotes.
This
right?
says horror movie quotes.
We're doing horror movie quotes. It's not even a Halloween movie. Wait, it's the Great Pumpkin? Yeah, it is. Never mind.
It's the Great Pumpkin.
I was thinking the terrible Thanksgiving one.
I know you like this one. I know that we both know this one. But okay. I think it'll make you smile to hear it. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a fine Chianti.
Oh, Alien.
Yep, that was it.
Sigourney Weaver says it to the alien.
She's talking about how she ate
the
Alan
alien.
Rickman's liver.
What? Alan Rickman? He's not an alien.
I'm referencing Galaxy Quest.
Oh, right. They are in Galaxy Quest together. I did forget about that.
Yeah, and Alan Rickman plays a guy who plays an alien.
Yeah, with Tim, the Tool Man Taylor.
Tim the Tool. That's all you have to say.
Yeah.
Stop the tool. Anyways, so that was just a little
we
fun,
did it.
Maybe. We did it. We'll probably delete this whole thing. There's also You Can't Kill the Boogeyman on here, which is from...
You Can't Kill the Boogeyman. That's from Halloween.
So, we'll get into Halloween. This movie is obviously very iconic as a horror movie and as a Halloween movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually my first time watching it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was good, and I see why it's a classic. It's like this weird thing. What makes it so iconic?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it like really latched on to people in 1978 when it released, for the same reason that so many people today are so like openly intrigued by mentally deranged serial killers. You get so many true crime podcasts and like true crime Netflix specials and
Yeah, we
things
get
like
to
that.
watch Mindhunter, where they're allowed to show it be a lot more graphic.
Right. And it's at some point, I think people became more open about being fascinated by criminal psychosis. And I think that is why this was like so intriguing to people.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that there was definitely also an opening up about it in popular media. The fact that you could represent it in horror on screen a little bit more overtly. It just sort of allowed people to talk about it in a more open way, but it also allowed for a significant amount of fear to come from that situation in a way that would be understandable, particularly the idea that psychosis of someone else could impact this like quiet suburban city. That I think that a big part of it too was the fact that it was shot on this city street, and the city street setting of it is very rural, it's very quaint, it's very relatable to a mass population. Whereas before, a lot of the reasons that people were getting killed in horror movies was because they were finding themselves at like a deserted farmhouse in the middle of Texas, or that they had stopped at this tourist destination for gasoline and the person inside just happened to be a telekinetic serial killer that turned his wife into a plastic mannequin. I mean, there's all sorts of movies that have the victims fall into the trap. And in this case, it's the ordinary people being sort of hunted. And a big part of it, too, is that there's no reason for Michael to be hunting Lori in particular.
They don't fall into the trap, they live in the trap. There's no escape.
Exactly. And so there's all of a sudden this like wild departure in motive. And Michael Myers is motiveless, essentially. And you could obviously make the claim he's revisiting his hometown and he dug up the tombstone of his sister, and that's what this is all about. And he's there to punish kids about having premarital sex. And it's one of those things that it's like they're supposed to be safe in this lovely little rural town. They don't lock their car doors. They don't have to like shut and lock their doors and check and double check to make sure that they're locked. And you think about how society was in these towns. It's like you could leave your door unlocked and your neighbor would come over and visit, but you weren't going to get robbed, you weren't going to have murderers come in.
Yeah, it almost reads like a home invasion movie. Like after we watched it, I had a nightmare.
Oh.
And this is the first movie that we watched that I had a nightmare about. And that makes me really excited about it, and that means that I liked the movie. And that I was like legitimately terrified by it, because home invasion movies tend to do that to me. It's just something that's like, home invasions, like I always think of The Strangers.
Oh god, yeah. For sure.
Which I still believe is the most terrifying movie I've ever seen. It just like strikes a chord with me. The fact that this stuff actually happens, maybe they don't, break out a mental hospital to begin with and raid a hardware store and treat teenage babysitters as like surrogates for their dead sister. Home invasions happen. And that's like what is terrifying about movies like this. There's like this motivelessness to it, and you can relate to all the victims. And John Carpenter, I guess he said that Michael Myers is supposed to be like the most unrelatable character. You're not supposed to be able to understand him at any level, and that's what makes him so frightening to the viewer.
Yeah, and I mean, it's even mentioned by Dr. Loomis in the movie that he worked for 8 years trying to connect with him and just was never able to do it.
Yeah, 8 years is a long time.
And there's such an incredible subtlety to this movie. The gore and the violence, it's all very understated. The only thing that was really exaggerative about the actual murders was some of the actors' facial expressions as they were being killed, but, who can blame them
for that? And the noises they make.
The noises they make, yeah, for sure. And it's almost like comedic, dramatic effect in a way, but there's a subtlety to the way that Michael is shot and the way that he interacts with you, the viewer, and the individual characters. Almost every time that he's like seen, there are as many times at least of him looking at the camera, and behind the camera is the victim. And so it's supposed to be that for a moment in time, we inhabit the body of the victim and the killer is looking directly at us. And I think about when Michael Myers has on the ghost costume when he's up in the house, and the girl she's in the bed and she thinks that it's her boyfriend, and it switches the perspectives. So it shows sort of like a side view close up of her, so, as a normal movie would, and then whenever it switches to look at Michael, it's always through her perspective. And so it feels very much like we, as the audience, are being placed in the shoes of the victim. We're the ones being sort of watched. And it does that in all of the scenes where Michael's really far away, too. We always get these, like, first-person point of views where we get to see Michael Myers watching us.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm going to disagree real quick, because in that scene where he's in the ghost costume and Linda's in the bed, you do get a few shots, like what you said, from her perspective, but there's also some where it's like shot from right outside the window next to the bed, where you can see her, but you can also see him like straight ahead in the doorway. It kind of struck me as like almost as if you are an outside viewer looking in on this scene. But also going off of the first person perspective of the victims, it's such a weird juxtaposition between that and then at the very beginning of the movie where you are seeing everything from Michael's perspective.
There's a shift that occurs.
Yeah, I feel like now that Michael Myers is he's kind of like worked his way into popular media. So like this is the first time I saw this, but I knew the concept of Michael Myers, and we started the movie and I saw like from the perspective of him, and then you see like the clown outfit like on his arm, and I was like, oh, it's not Michael Myers. There's probably gonna be like some lame jump scare and it's like the little brother or something. And it turns out it was both.
That's the big thing about it. There was so much perspective in the film overall that I think that the perspective sort of gives the movie some of its gravitas. And I was thinking, even, you mentioned being outside the window. There's a lot of references and use of window imagery in the movie. I mean, I think about how we see Michael so many times through windows, and we see other characters through windows, and it's almost meant to be a representation of what like a passerby might see and might glean from it, because in most of those shots where we see things through windows, it's fairly innocuous. Like that particular moment that we were just talking about where he's in the ghost costume, you wouldn't expect anything of it. It just looks like, oh, this couple's being a little odd in their bedroom. It doesn't have to have any meaning other than that. And so I still think that perspective is part of it, and it's about the sort of pseudo-normalcy of their interactions. Going on to what you said about the child thing, though, having Michael Myers start off as a kid, it is a very different experience. And I think it's because we don't necessarily get to see children serial killers in a lot of movies. And there's such a blankness and an emptiness to the portrayal of child Michael Myers that to then imagine the 20 years later, this sort of unfettered psychosis growth, it really is startling, because it's the antithesis of what we would want or imagine. In the remake of it, the newer version of Halloween that was done by Rob Zombie, they make the kid actor significantly more brutal. He has a lot more kills. He is much more violent. It's much more graphic. And it tries to give him like an element of pathos by showing him being like brutalized and neglected as a child by his family. And in this one, it's really not that. You don't get that at all. All you get is this like emptiness, because his sister is not like abusive. He doesn't have neglectful parents. It's just one day he decided that that's what he was going to do. And I think there's something truly, truly terrifying to that.
That's like the whole mystery. Like, you know that as soon as he escapes the mental hospital, you're like, he's going to kill people. This slasher movie. And like, that's not the mystery of it. The mystery of it is why. And when the movie starts, when he's a child, you're like, we're going to find out some stuff. This is going to mean something later on in the movie. And the movie goes on. As an adult, he's just a blank slate of a character. No emotions, has no lines. There's just like no characteristics to him. And I think that that's like genius, first of all. But also, who would we be to not try to glean meaning from the opening scene? So Sister is the first person he kills, assumingly. And it's right after she has this sexual encounter with her boyfriend that lasts all of a minute and a half. And you can see, like, from his perspective, like, he's looking at the window, and then they go upstairs, and then he comes into the house, and then the boyfriend leaves, and she's, like, naked in her room, and he stabs her.
All right, I think it's another draw from Psycho. I'll give my 2 cents about this because I've actually thought about this before too. Why does Norman Bates kill in Psycho, Zach? It's because his mother considers other women to be lustful and vile, and that they will tempt her son away or tempt her son into being a bad person and doing, terrible lustful things. And that's, it's sort of like a pseudo religious morality underpinning to it. And this carries on that tradition in full force. It's almost like Michael, in a way, is exacting a morality that is being referenced. And that comes up in Scream as well, when, they talk about the rules of horror cinema, which is don't have sex, don't do drugs, don't say you'll be right back. It's almost like a cautionary tale. In a way, it's supposed to say, hey, if you do this bad thing, the boogeyman will come and kill you. And I think it's really supposed to be that.
Okay. I just don't see it as that. I think John Carpenter said that. Like, what did I see that... Hold on. IMDb, Halloween. Here. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill have stated many times over the years that they did not consciously set out to depict virginity as a way of defeating a rampaging killer. The reason why why the horny teenagers all die is simply that they are so preoccupied with getting laid that they don't notice that there's a killer at large. There's also that interesting line that Annie has. She's talking on the phone with her boyfriend, and says something of like, it's like some like sexual innuendo or something, and then you can hear him kind of be like on the other end of the phone, and she's like, well, that's not all I think about, implying that like all these teenagers think about is sex.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's kind of like shining the spotlight on the whole like possible motive of killing. So it's like, so I think it's somewhere in between, where it's like kind of a like morality check, like you said, but also it's not necessarily because they have sex, but because they're like obsessed with it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of neglectful in a way, that the reason that he killed his sister was partially because she was a neglectful person towards him, and so that there is a sense of rejection and neglect that comes from it. And I think that could be why later on he kills these teens in compromising situations.
Well, they're not taking care of the children that they're supposed to be babysitting.
They're not taking care, because there's no indication that Michael is ever going to kill the kids.
Right, that's what just occurred to me. You know what? I think you've cracked it.
He has a vengefulness towards babysitters. This movie could have been called The Babysitter Murders.
Yeah,
I believe that was what the working title was called. Yeah, I think it was the working title.
I'm so glad they changed it.
Yeah, well, I think that they changed it because they were like, this is going to be a killer anthology series. And by killer anthology series, I mean a good anthology series, and not one related to one specific killer that eventually does happen. It does become just about Michael Myers.
This is what we should do next Halloween. For next Halloween episode, we watch the rest of the Halloween movies.
All of them. Just all of them. Oh, yeah. So are we including the remakes? Are we including Halloween H2O? Are we including Halloween Resurrection?
No, Matt, we're watching every single movie that has the word Halloween in its title.
Okay, the whole series is just, it's totally bonkers after...
It's a roller coaster from what it sounds like.
Yeah, you hit 4 and then nothing makes sense, and then Halloween H2O for me is like a small bright spot, and then it's like, and here we go, Jack and Jill are now tumbling down the hill.
So did you not like the latest one?
I actually didn't mind the latest one. It wasn't my favorite movie, but I think that it did a lot of justice in the way that it was shot. So they sort of treat Jamie Lee Curtis in the remake like they treated The Shape in this movie. So filming her in a way that is very understated and very subtle in its creepiness. So I will say that it definitely works. The way that they sort of erased all of the film series' history was like a little weird, a little mind-boggling, something that I had to get over to be able to like embrace this as its own film.
Yeah, you'd think they would have at least kept Halloween 2, since that was John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. They did Halloween 1 through 3, right? And they kind of like bowed out after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So you
believe
think
so.
that they would have like at least kept 1 and 2 because those involve Laurie and Michael Myers.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Loomis.
Right.
Loomis
So
has great importance in some of the later Michael Myers films.
yeah, I really liked Dr. Loomis because he's like the realist.
No bullshit.
He's the one that knows what's going on. He's like, we're going to take every precaution, but also we're not going to tell anyone.
Yeah.
And I think that this man would survive the apocalypse, but he would survive it alone.
That's the thing, like, I found it refreshing that in a horror movie, there is a character that's just like, I'm gonna find Michael, I know that it's him, I'm going to kill him. There's no
I'm gonna shoot
mincing.
him 8 times.
Yeah, there is no mincing about what his plan is. He knows who he is, he knows what his character's role is, and he does it. He's just like, I worked with this person for 8 years. There's no fixing this. There is no rehabilitation. This is the only way that this is going to end in a way that will result in peace.
Right, and he says that right away when you see him in the car with that nurse. He describes Michael as like, he's not a man, he's pure evil, he's like got those black eyes with nothing behind them. I mean, that's pretty much like all we get about Michael, aside from the fact that we know he killed his sister.
It makes it very clear that like his whole being is this like blankness to it. And it's interesting that even Dr. Loomis has sort of this fear of the unknown.
Well, and he also mentions the important fact of like he has not said a word since he killed his sister when he was what, like
6?
What's so eerie and creepy about Michael as a villain, he makes no sound. Laurie stabs him in the eye with a clothes hanger, and he doesn't make a sound. He just kind of falls over, and that's it. And then she like stabs him later on. He like kind of reacts to it, but he doesn't make a sound at all. There's like no scream or anything.
Even when he's like walking, he is deadly silent.
Yeah, and it's just aside from his breathing. And they kind of like make a deal out of that at the end. Like when he finally like disappears after being shot, you can kind of hear his breathing, and they do different shots around the neighborhood, and like his breathing gets louder and louder and more constant. And then it blends into the sound of the breeze. And I wonder if that's a reference to Michael being this omnipresent being.
He always knows where people are. He has this uncanny ability to like sense people to a point. It's actually really interesting. You've heard of the game Dead by Daylight, right?
Oh yeah.
So Dead by Daylight, he was one of the DLC characters that was added later on, actually along with the Haddonfield map area. And every killer in Dead by Daylight has a special ability, and his is, if you hold down right click, he does this sensory thing where if there are survivors on the map and they are in what would normally be line of sight, you get this stalk effect on them so that they are highlighted in white so you can follow them. And it's supposed to be sort of a reference to the way that in these movies, Michael Myers has that strange omnipotence. It's sort of become a trope in horror movie that the killer always knows where the victims are. Even when, Laurie, she tries to psych him out the second time.
When she hides in the closet.
She hides in the closet, but she runs to the balcony and she opens the balcony up and then goes to the closet to be like, oh, she jumped off of the balcony. There's no confirmation of Michael seeing that. Instead, he just like walks up to the closet and starts pulling on the door. He is damn near omniscient.
And that ties in with this idea of fate in the movie. Like they make a really big point out of that. And like the fact that he just doesn't die, and the quote that we talked about earlier, you can't kill the boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it's fate. It's maybe his fate and Laurie's fate. Laurie's fate to be stalked by him, and his fate to like just never die.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this scene at the beginning where Laurie is in English class, and she like looks out the window and sees Michael standing by the car for the first time, and you hear the teacher in the background is like, no matter what actions this character took, he was always destined to his fate. And she like finishes the lecture with, fate never changes.
Very heavy-handed.
Yeah, and I was like, well, that's got to mean something.
Oh, yeah.
It is happening in the background, and it's like pretty quiet, but it's still like, it's there for anyone who is listening. The theme of fate, and with the omnipresence of Michael, and the fact that he basically can't be killed, it's like you get these pieces of the puzzle. By the end of the first movie, you don't have all of them. That's like kind of what produces some of the fear, but also what is so interesting about this movie.
It's very much like Michael could represent anyone. And actually, I wanted to make a brief aside before continuing that. Listeners, if ever a character in a horror movie is sitting in on a class, you better be damn sure that that class is going to have some sort of pertinent information to the rest of what's going on. Example, the science class in The Happening. All of the classes in I Know What You Did Last Summer. All of the classes in Friday the 13th. Or Nightmare on Elm Street. It's every time that there's a class, they're reading. First of all, they're reading something that is like a little too profound. It's like, all right, everybody, today we're going to be reading Michael Foucault's Madness and Civilization. I know that you're freshmen, but I'm sure that you're going to be fine. And so the
I'm
whole
16.
thing, yeah, it's just like, I said it to you last week, but it's just like, all right, everybody, today we're going to be reading Rene Descartes. We're going to be talking about Freudian dream analysis. I know that you're high school sophomores, but hopefully the fact that you're in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie doesn't have any relevance to the fact that we're doing dream analysis. It's always so funny to me that they do that. But getting back to the point that I was initially making, which was Michael is this blank canvas, and I think that one of the most potent things that they did was in the credits, actually, they don't call him Michael. They call him the Shape.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, so he's referred to as the Shape. And so they allow it to be sort of this moldable figure that can stand in for any sort of evil. And in a way, the whole movie makes a point of taking away Michael's humanity and replacing it with this objectification that is pure evil personified. Something that can make people more afraid in that case is the idea that everyone has this sort of insidious evilness to them that at any point could take over completely. And by giving him this blank slate, he really does represent the boogeyman at large. His form is generally not exaggerated. Like, he's tall, but he has like a fairly typical masculine build. There's nothing about him that like necessarily makes him stand out like you would expect of a Freddy Krueger who has the knife glove and the burned face, or the Jason who's got a hockey mask and a large machete and is also twice the size of any other person that exists.
What's interesting with all of that, though, and with like the blank shape that is Michael Myers, is that we get his full name.
Yeah.
And there's like this strange specificity to, we have his identity.
We have his identity, but it's meaningless.
Right. I wonder if that's just coincidence. We're like, we're going to have this horror villain, his name's going to be Michael Myers, and they like maybe didn't think twice about it, but if they did, that's genius.
I think that it's really a trick that John Carpenter is playing on the audience, because by giving him a name, we sort of assume that he's going to have something human about him. We assume that he's going to have something that is a history or a backstory, but really they pull the rug out and he's just this thing. We never get something that makes him a defeatable character. There's no weakness to his name, where there is a weakness to Jason or to Freddy or to the demons in The Exorcist or in Poltergeist, knowing that it's Pazuzu, or knowing that it's Bathsheba in The Conjuring. having character names, we have a way to defeat them, and this is not that case.
Especially with the way that this movie ends, it leaves you wondering. The question of why is always there. The mystery of this movie, I think, is what has made it so iconic through the years and what made the franchise so iconic, given the best and the worst of it.
Yeah. Now, do you think that there was any trouble that came about later on with the series as Mike Myers, the wildly successful comedic actor, came up? As he started to rise in prominence?
As I was searching on Shudder, I was like typing in Halloween, and I was like, "Oh, there's Michael Myers," and because it like had his face or his mask on like the cover of it, and I go, "That's Shrek." It's about. And I remember, like, as a teenager, I remember being, like, confused because I'd be like, Michael Myers.
So Mike Myers is a serial killer?
And then one of my friends, I remember, tried to convince me that it was Mike Myers that played Michael Myers.
Oh, you can't disrespect Nick Castle like that.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, so, like, he's playing himself in, like, I feel like that's just a strange decision to make.
Oh man, but I wonder, I bet somebody's done this, and if not, I should do this. A cut of the film Halloween, but all of Michael Myers' scenes are cut with Mike Myers doing other scenes from like Austin Powers or Cat in the Hat into them. Instead of the John Carpenter score, it's Soul Bossa Nova.
Every time you see Michael, like, in the background, the Austin Powers thing. Or even, if you want to be like a meme king, you can replace it with All-Star if you want to make a Shrek reference.
Somebody once told me when he breaks down the door, but on the body, it's Michael punching through the door. Somebody once told me the word. Somebody's got to do that.
If you're handy with video editing at all, do it. Yeah, and speaking of that scene, Laurie's like struggling with this garden door that has like a rake up against it, and meanwhile, Michael just punches straight through a solid wooden door.
Yeah,
You're
but
like, just punch through the glass door.
And it's so funny because it's just like, Laurie, why don't you're in a kitchen. Anything around you could be used to bust out that glass. But what does she do? She open palm slaps the glass into breaking. There are so many more effective things that you can do. You could have punched the glass. You could have wrapped your hand in a bit of the cloth around you and punched it. Why did you open palm slap the glass?
That's more surface area for glass to be embedded in.
Yeah. And then she doesn't take the rake with her or try to use it at all to fight. That's the thing too about Laurie Strode in that movie is she does the most minimal amount of fighting back possible.
And she holds on to the knives like William Shatner holds on to wives. Every time she gets the knife away from him, it's like, oh, I killed him. I'm just going to drop this next to his body and then go and leave the room.
Yeah.
Check on the kids. Like, no, you take that knife with you and check on the kids so you can defend the children and yourself.
Yeah, stabs him with a knitting needle, immediately picks up the knife, drops the knife again after picking it up. And it's like, why did you even pick it up in the first place?
Yeah, she had like that second of survival instinct and then she lost it.
It's one of those things where it's just like, man, this character's great. She's able to fight back and she's so resourceful, but like, she doesn't have to be that resourceful.
That's the dissonance from what you said earlier. It's an old movie. There are elements where it's like, why wouldn't you just do this? Like, why wouldn't you just punch through the glass right away, Laurie? And they're like those moments, like you can relate to the characters because this could happen in your neighborhood. But then the minutia of it, like why wouldn't you just hold on to the knife?
Every once in a
like,
while,
I would
it's
do that.
like we're padding the runtime here. We're padding the runtime.
Yeah, it was all so that you could get the impression he doesn't die at the cost of common sense.
There's also an element of comedy, I suppose, to like him getting stabbed in the neck by the knitting needle, falling on the ground, lying on his back, and then pulling a gotcha and getting up. And then later on, he gets stabbed with the wire hanger, falls onto the ground, waits, and then gets back up. Every time there's a little bit of like a gotcha moment. And I always wondered like why he would have done that.
Whatever weird kind of like demonic curse or whatever thing that keeps him alive
Yeah.
is like doing its work. So he's got like a recharge kind
Yeah.
of thing going on.
He's a cat. He's a nine-lived cat.
Ooh, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Michael
We
Myers.
killed him 9 times. He only got killed 3 times in this movie.
Michael Meowers.
That's the name of the episode right there.
He is as aloof as cats.
He's definitely a cat person.
Yeah.
Michael Myers definitely a cat person, not a dog person. Oh,
He's not a dog person. Ooh,
that leads me to
that was a good segue.
why do they always have to kill dogs? At that point in the movie, you're like, yes, we get it. He is not mentally well. Always a dog. Like, they always have to kill the dog, and I don't understand it. The demons.
I'm gonna say that it's just an unfortunate nature of the movies that we've watched that they kill the dog, because there are a lot of movies
It's
that kill
not
the cat.
just the ones we've watched.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty. There's, of the ones we watched, just to point it out to people, The Conjuring, The Babadook, this one.
The Thing.
Am I missing? The Thing. How could I miss that? All the dogs died in The Thing. Maybe John Carpenter doesn't like dogs. Anyways, just why? Can we stop with the animal abuse? I'm someone who enjoys animals more than people, so that like hurts me more than anything. And I feel like that's why they do it. So many people are pet owners. That's a kind of a nightmarish concept, losing your pet. So let's talk about Laurie a little bit as a character.
I absolutely love Jamie Lee Curtis. She was in one of my favorite Christmas movies, Christmas with the Cranks, which is also a slasher movie, if you edit it the right way. It's also a home invasion movie, but the home invasion is by other people.
I think Christmas with the Cranks was based off of... It was like a John Grisham novel, right?
What? Why would... No.
It was based off of...
The Pelican Brief?
No, not the Pelican Brief. Skipping Christmas. John Grisham's Skipping Christmas. How did we get on? Oh.
I just love Jamie Lee Curtis. She also went on... She was actually on an episode of Game Grumps with her son. They played Super Mario Party with the Game Grumps.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it was really fun to listen to because she was incredibly sassy. But it was actually in that episode, Dan Avidan, who's in the Game Grumps, asked her, was the guy who played Michael Myers nice in real life? And Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, affirmed that the actor who played the Shape was a nice gentleman. So
he was or wasn't?
He was a nice guy. He was a nice gentleman.
Oh,
he was a very kind man. Well, Jamie Lee Curtis also remembered the woman from Christmas with the Cranks who was only in like one scene with her.
I do get the impression that she's like one of those like wholesome Hollywood
She's
people.
great, and she's a good actress.
Definitely a good actress.
Yeah.
I think I saw after this movie she was like convinced that it was like the end of her Hollywood career because she like felt that she didn't do a good job.
Oh, for this movie? In this movie?
Yeah, for Halloween. Actually, I think it was for her audition for this movie. That she was like, oh, I didn't do a good job or something. And she is Janet Leigh's daughter, so that kind of like helped.
Yeah, but I like to think that Jamie Lee Curtis really made it on her own merit. As much as Janet Leigh is a killer actress, I would say that Jamie Lee Curtis is just as good.
I think that Janet Leigh probably got her the audition, and then she rocked the audition.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so cool to see them on screen together in Halloween H2O.
Yeah, so her character in this movie, Laurie, she's like kind of made out to be the like slightly nerdy version of her friend group. Mm-hmm. You know, she has a lot of discussions with Annie of like, guys think I'm too smart, and she does have a more serious personality.
Men are intimidated by a strong, smart woman.
She says, and guys think I'm too smart. And then like later on they show her bedroom and there's like a globe on her dresser, and it's like, that's how you know. That's how you know she's smart. She has a globe.
She has a globe.
Yeah, she also has believable friends. Like it's believable interactions between her and her friends. Like it's just like teenagers goofing around and like teasing each other. That's like so believable.
The pull of this movie was that the actual characters, the victims, were gonna be relatable to the teen audiences that happened to see them.
Yeah, I feel like Annie, she's the first to die, and she kind of like serves as foreshadowing. Mm-hmm. Like she says right before like the whole dog thing that we talked about, she says, oh, I'm about to be ripped apart by the family dog, and she like talks about how much she hates the dog. And I feel like, you know, ripped apart, like they give you that imagery even before.
Yeah, they make it seem
happens.
like she's gonna get stabbed to death and like dismembered.
Right. And then there's that one scene where it's just her and Lori like walking down the sidewalk when they were like walking home from school. And she tells Lori, "Oh, he wants to take you out tonight." It's kind of like a double meaning. Taking someone out
Yeah.
means killing them.
Yeah, I mean, there's also this idea of getting like stuck when she gets stuck in the window.
With like the home invasion idea, it's like you always have to have an escape plan. Like, what if someone broke into your house and tried to kill you right now? Like, would you go out the window? Like, you might get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so speaking of Annie, so she kind of like serves as a foreshadowing, but also when Lori goes into the house that Annie had been babysitting in, and you get Annie and Bob and Linda's bodies like all kind of like displayed, almost like it was for Lori to see.
For certain, he has a flair for the theatrics.
Yeah, and Annie's body is like splayed out on the bed with his sister's tombstone over her.
There is like this idea of him recreating the punishment that he gave to his sister with these kids. But I do agree there is something about the way that he like sets up the actual kills after he's done so, because he puts one person in the cupboard and he has the one guy like drop from the ceiling and is like dangling. There's something weirdly comedic, almost funhousey about it, and I wonder how much of that is meant to be funhousey. And the only reason I bring that up is because there has to be some sort of meaning behind him wearing the clown outfit at the beginning of the film and like the clown mask, because they make a big point of showing him picking up the boyfriend's clown mask and putting it on so that he can go murder his sister. But I wonder how much of it is supposed to be sort of a referential item.
I kind of thought of it as the stark juxtaposition of his emptiness of personality compared to like the colorful personality that we associate with clowns.
There is certainly a starkness to it, and also clowns are terrifying, and I think that there's something to be said about the fact that clowns are terrifying, and that could be certainly part of it as well. So to get back on that a little bit, the most interesting kill to me, and also the dumbest kill in this movie, is when he lifts up the boyfriend that was supposed to go get beer and impales him into the wall with the kitchen knife, and he's hanging there with the knife is clearly not deep enough to have reached the wall, but that's a different thing. There's two parts to this. So first of all, that's implausible. There's no way that worked that way. But two, the thing about it that I liked so much is after he did it, he just has his hands at his side. Michael does. He just has his hands at his side, and he just sort of slightly cocks his head to the left to look at it. And there's something weirdly innocent about that moment. Almost like a childlike fascination with what he did. As if he's not as old as we're meant to believe, as if the broken child serial killer Michael is still the same one that's doing this now. Which, if that were the case, you could say, oh, well, then the whole thing behind this is that he's perpetually living in this cycle of killing and punishing his sister and her suitors.
Yeah, and they do make other attempts in the movie to make his character less mature. The doctor's talking to like some other, like one of his colleagues, and he's like, yeah, he like stole my car or whatever, and he's like, well, he doesn't know how to drive because he got locked up as a child. And so like that, it was like immediate of like, oh yeah, like he's still kind of a kid at heart.
Yeah, and he crashes the car, so I mean, it's not like he was great at driving. He could have just...
And he also tailgates throughout the whole movie. Yeah. Well, going back to the kill that you're mentioning, Bob, first thing I want to say is he breaks two of the Scream rules that one has sex, and then he says, "I'll be right back" to Linda as he goes to get the beer.
He goes to get beer, which is a drug. 3 rules.
Alcohol is a drug.
It is a drug.
Do all the hard drugs like Flonase and
ooh, I'm about to fucking jive with some Mucinex night. Give me some of that melatonin.
I forgot what I was. Oh, Bob. Bob's death. He defies physics with his dead body.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's what I thought you were gonna say when you started saying he broke two of the rules. I thought you were gonna say of physics and not of Scream. This movie, we've covered a lot of great material. The thing about this movie is that it's essentially an endless hole of talking points, especially once you start talking about how important it was and how significant it is to popular media and like culture, because everything after this is really referential to this movie, and they owe a lot to things that this movie did and pioneered.
Yeah, you do get a lot of like the elements of persistence of horror movie killers from this. Even in demonic possession movies, you get like the persistence of demons and like this idea of these movies don't always have to end with either everyone dying or the entity being defeated.
Yeah.
It can just be this like open-ended thing.
We get a final girl.
Yeah, we get a final girl, but it's also like you're left with this ominous, dreadful feeling at the end because it's just like Michael's body disappears after he's been shot. You're like, oh, he's still alive. He's still out there. And that's it. Black screen after that, credits roll. There's no resolution.
There's nothing to feel good about.
That's, I think, another, like, a pioneer move of this movie.
They go down, they see Michael's missing body, Soul Bossa Nova starts playing. I agree completely. The quintessence of character here is so important, and I think that it really paved the way for the creation of a character because it also proved that you didn't need sort of the elaborate history of the character to pull the movie. You really could make do with this blank slate and this meaningless murder. So yeah. Do you want to do some trivia?
Yeah, I do have a couple of trivia items.
Sick.
Yeah, so this is Blades of Gory.
Nice.
So we already talked about the first one, actually, how the original title was The Babysitter Murders. And actually the reason why they decided to change it to Halloween is because for budgetary reasons they didn't want to have like a bunch of costume changes, so they decided that all the murders were going to take place on the same night, and they're like, what better night than Halloween? So that is how we ended up with that title and it actually taking place on Halloween. All right, first actual question. So Jamie Lee Curtis is the daughter of Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho.
Yes.
And Carpenter saw this casting decision as a huge tribute to Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
What made the tribute ironic?
That she wasn't his first choice.
Well, kind of. That's not the answer I intended, but I'll take it. Okay, so Jamie Lee Curtis they had actually planned for her to be in Psycho 2.
No.
But since she was in Halloween, the filming of Halloween interfered with that. So she actually could have been in a real, like, Alfred Hitchcock movie instead of like a tribute to it. So
she could have been in the remake. Yeah,
it's truly ironic. So all right, the next one. So the role of Dr. Loomis was offered to and turned down by Peter Cushing, who, for those who don't know, was the guy who played Obi-Wan in the original Star Wars trilogy. And
he also was in The Curse of Frankenstein and The Horror of Dracula. And I know what this answer is because he was, I believe, in it with Horror of Dracula. It was Christopher Lee.
It was Christopher Lee.
Peter Cushing was Dr. Van Helsing, and Christopher Lee was Dracula. Peter Cushing, Michael Gall, Christopher Lee. Yeah.
Wasn't Michael Gall in
Sleepy Hollow?
Yeah, I was just going to say. Yeah, so anyways, Christopher Lee, he later said that was like the biggest mistake in his career.
His biggest mistake.
This role down. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Oh well.
That's interesting that he would say that considering he was in a metal band.
What's wrong with that?
I would have just assumed that was the biggest mistake of his career.
Well, I don't know I think that may have been like tangential to his career.
Right. Do we count that as career? Didn't he do like a metal Christmas album?
I don't know. That seems like more of a passion project than a career.
Yes.
I think he would have been great as Dr. Loomis, but...
Yeah, okay, so I did find it that Christopher Lee has an album called A Heavy Metal Christmas. It's available on Amazon.
We'll have to listen to that. when we wrap it up here.
Oh yeah, this will be perfect.
Well, this is kind of musically related. What time signature
5/4.
is the Halloween theme written in? Yes, it is in 5/4.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and.
I specifically bring this up because John Carpenter wrote the music for this film, and it's like John Carpenter learned this unique time signature from his father. It's like, okay, 5/4 is not that unique.
Probably learned it from Horace Silver's Take 5.
Slightly implies that John Carpenter's father invented 5/4.
Yeah. What?
Yeah.
That's not right.
I was like, all right, okay. So I just thought that was a great thing to end with, huh?
Yeah, a wonderful question to end with that I definitely knew.
Before we go here, please check out our new Facebook page. If you are Facebook savvy, give us a follow. Kind of the same stuff you see on the Instagram page. Give you updates on episodes, give you clips of episodes, if you like little tidbits. So give that a follow.
You can also answer polls.
Oh yeah, in case you didn't see on the Instagram page or the Facebook page, we did a poll for this episode. It was the choice between this and A Nightmare on Elm Street, and we had people vote, and we ended up with this one. So sometimes we'll do that, I guess, so you can have a say in which movie we cover.
Yeah, especially when we get into Christmas and you're going to have to choose between Black Christmas, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Black Christmas 2, Krampus.
Are there any Hanukkah horror movies?
Hanukkah horror movies. That's a good one. I will have to look and see if I can find anyone. Like, what if they had something that was like a play on the word Torah, but with horror? Torah?
Shh, the Thor. That's like a dwarf from Middle Earth.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach.
And we'll see you next week.